Hello, friends. My name is Elle, and this is Linda Moon, Director of Grow Kids Curriculum, and you are watching a Grow Deep Dive. We are looking at a series in this video called Opposite Day, which is from Volume 5 of Grow Kids. And we're going to give you kind of first a big picture look at what the series is all about, but then we're going to get specific and give you some really helpful tips and tricks on how to make this series really awesome.
And if you are a Grow user, then of course we want you to use this video to give you a little bit of a head start as you plan for this month. And even if you're not, we have lots of great ideas here for you that you can take and just implement them in your ministry and make it your own. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first start off by giving you an overview of Opposite Day, and then we're going to talk about the theme. So that's your programming, your decorating, some fun, cool ideas there. And then we're going to talk about the structure in which we talk a little bit more about the teaching content. And finally, we'll round it out with some fun tips for you to make Opposite Day awesome.
So, Opposite Day is a series that is all about opposites because it is all about the teachings of Jesus, which were often filled with a lot of things that are kind of countercultural, like opposite of what we either want to do or opposite of what the world tells us to do. And so, we are going to play with a bunch of like opposite ideas, opposite things, and just have a bunch of fun with opposites during this series.
Yeah, and we're going to be looking at a few passages in the book of Luke and helping kids kind of understand what Jesus said and why Jesus said it and why it is beneficial for us to do the things that Jesus told us to do, even though they're very seemingly opposite.
So here's what this is going to look like. First of all, in week 1, we are going to look at Luke 5, which is where Jesus calls his first disciples. So this is the passage where you've got Simon, Andrew, James, and John, and they all begin to follow Jesus for the first time. And so the big idea that we're looking at in this week of the series is following Jesus is the opposite of following ourselves.
In week 2, we're looking at Luke chapter 6, verses 17 through 26. And this is a passage where Jesus teaches about blessings and woes. And in this passage, Jesus talks about things that don't seem like blessings, and he calls them blessings, and then the opposite for the woes. And we want kids to understand that regardless of status or just how their life is panning out, anyone can come to Jesus. And so the big idea for week 2 is our struggles bring us closer to Jesus.
Then in week 3, we're looking at Luke 6:27 through 38. And in this passage, Jesus teaches us something that is like very opposite of what we would like to do, which is to love our enemies. Obviously, kids don't typically have many enemies, but they do kind of have like feelings about people based on who's nice to them and who is not so nice to them. So we're going to take this idea and make it kid friendly in this week. And the big idea for this week is our enemies help us learn to love.
And finally, in week 4, we're going to the story of Jesus's transfiguration in Luke chapter 9. And this is, of course, a story where God's voice spoke and the disciples knew for sure 100% that Jesus was God's son. And the thing is, it's not like Jesus suddenly became God's son, right? Jesus had always been God's son, but it was here that they knew for sure. And so that applies to us today. And that's why our big idea reminds us that Jesus is with us, even though we can't see him.
And then, kind of to bring all of these like opposite concepts and ideas together, this month's memory verse is 2 Corinthians 12:9a. And as usual, we always have like our sign language videos and all of that stuff to help kids memorize this passage. But this month it is, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. All right, so let's talk about the theme of this series. As always, we give you a really fun decorating theme that kind of goes throughout this whole series. You can use it for decorating, for games, for just like props, for all of that good stuff. And we have plenty of ideas to help you do that. And so since the series is called Opposite Day, the theme for this series is just opposite things. So Linda, what is this going to look like in terms of decor and games and all of that fun stuff?
Yeah, my one advice to you with Opposite Day is don't overthink it. The easiest thing you can do is fill your room with common opposite things, right? Like putting a bunch of winter stuff on a summer backdrop or vice versa, or just kind of opposite pairings like night and day, tall and short. bacon and eggs, cat and dog, and just put a bunch of these opposite things around your room. Some more fun things you could do would be to put arrows and signs throughout your room, or just different things that kind of point in different directions, like have an arrow going up, but it's actually, it says down on it or something, and just kind of have fun with it. And also, there's this really fun finish start line that you could have fun with in your ministry space. Also, you can also think about setting up your teaching space in general in reverse. So if you're usually in the front of the room, like flip that around and have the kids in the front and whatever you want to do. Also, you can have all of your volunteers, wear their clothes backwards, maybe all 4 weeks, or at least just when you kick off opposite days. So that'd be fun and uncomfortable, but really funny. Also, pictures, please. And another thing you can do is you can make big things small and small things big. So anything that you would normally see at, small, just blow that up. And anything you think should be big, make that really tiny and just really comical that way. Just whatever it is, just think anything that doesn't belong in this room now belongs in this room, and just go with that. And in addition to that, make sure you check out our programming guide for more ideas, more visuals, more ideas for crafts, and just lots of little goodies in there that you can take with you.
So next up, we want to look at the structure of the series. If you've been using Grow Kids for a while, then you know that there are some things that are always consistent in the way that we do our series and some things that change all the time. One of the things that changes all the time, for example, are like our big idea reveals. We do that differently in every series in a way that corresponds with the theme of that series. And that just kind of helps us keep like consistency and structure for you and for the kids that you're leading, because we all know kids do thrive with some structure, but it keeps it fresh so that not every series feels the same. So, Linda, talk to us about what is unique about the structure of this particular series.
Well, I want to say what's unique about Opposite Day is that each week is unique. Like there's very little that gets repeated. So it's really fun. And I think you're going to have just so much fun with all of these wacky ideas. But there are a couple things that I want to draw your attention to, and that is how we do the big idea reveals each week and how we do the response modules for this series.
Awesome. Yeah. And so we kind of already went through the big ideas for each week of this series. And so that's kind of just like the little tagline for that week to help kids remember the truth that we are trying to teach them. It sort of encapsulates like the scripture and the lesson for that week in a way that is kid friendly and hopefully easy to remember. And then every single week, we make a big deal out of the way we reveal these big ideas because, we want it to be fun. We want kids to like want to remember it. And sometimes having a memorable experience really helps that stick into kids' brains. So what does this look like for this series, Linda?
Yeah, so for the memorable experience you're making for Opposite Day is you're going to be using a color wheel, because we're talking about opposites, but also about how opposites don't always have to be like repelling forces, right? They can be complementary. So we're using a color wheel to show that colors that are opposite of each other are also called complementary colors. And so you're going to make a color wheel that kind of looks like this, and just take different color paper and just create each of the wedges of the color wheel. And you're going to write the big idea, just kind of space it out. Our instructions will tell you how to do that. And just make sure you write one word or two of the big idea on each wedge. If you don't want to recreate this wheel week to week, you can use sticky notes or other things that you can peel off and replace for future weeks. And then put up only the primary colors on the first week and ask kids to figure out what the secondary colors are or their complementary colors are. And as they put the wedges in the right place, then it should complete the wheel so you can say the big idea. And I think week to week, we just play around with it. So like the second week, we're putting up only the complementary secondary colors, and they have to put the primary colors up. And I think it's a really fun way to talk about opposites and also a fun way to reveal the big idea.
I love it. That's super, super fun. And now let's talk about those response modules. So when we talk about responses, what we're talking about is just any kind of like activity or moment where we take like an actual experience to help kids apply the things that they've learned. So it is a chance for them to respond to what they've heard by maybe talking with God or talking with each other or making a decision of what they will do when they leave church. So what does that look like for this series, Linda?
Yeah, I wanted to point out the response modules for this series because each week the kids are going to be doing something pretty creative, and I think it will help them remember the things that you're talking about really well. So, the first week, when we're talking about how following Jesus is kind of the opposite of following ourselves, we're doing a little activity with like a cup. And of course, this is what we use to talk about like optimism, pessimism. But we're having kids use that cup to write out something that something that's not good, like a worry in their life. And then on the bottom of the cup, we're having them write how following Jesus helps us see that in a different light. So I thought that was really creative and pretty deep. And I think kids will just enjoy that experience. Week 2, we have this response module called Snow in Summer. And obviously, it was inspired by Olaf from Frozen. But the talking point there is really cute because like Olaf doesn't focus on the fact that he would melt in summer, but he focuses on all the fun he's going to have. And so the big idea that week is that our struggles bring us closer to Jesus. And so we're having kids think about like what are some ways that our struggles can bring us closer to Jesus. And then they're going to make a cute little marshmallow snowman on a summer backdrop. So I thought that'd be really fun. And then for week 3, there's a response module called Sticks and Stones. And of course, the full thing is like sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And the talking point there is that words actually do hurt, but we're talking to kids about how we can allow words to not affect us and how we can just kind of rise above these situations. So they're going to be doing a little bit of a rock art. And the point there is a rock can be weaponized. Like a rock itself is neutral, but if you throw it, it can be a weapon. Or you can decorate it and just make it something beautiful. So that's what they're doing that week, which I thought was really sweet. And then for the final week, they're doing a response module called Jesus Maps. And we're using Google Maps or some sort of navigation thing where kids see that we trust something that we can't see to give us directions. And so that reinforces the idea that Jesus guides us and is with us even though we can't see him. So I think all of these modules are very great.
I love that. And I cannot wait to see people's pictures because all of these little crafts sound so fun and so cute. And also, I want to do them. Amazing. So now that we've covered all of that good stuff, let's wrap things up with just a few helpful tips on how to make the most of the series.
So, the first tip we have for you is to get kids to color in opposite ways. And I know you've probably heard us talking about coloring pages before, but you guys, the Grow coloring pages are so cute, especially this month because the concepts are a little bit more abstract. So, the illustrations are adorable. And so, we want to encourage you to encourage your kids to enjoy coloring. And I know some of the older kids might not want to color, maybe even some of the younger kids. And so turn it into a little bit of a challenge. So you can have them use opposite colors, kind of like a film negative, but don't use film negative as an example because kids won't know what that is. And then you can have kids use their opposite non-dominant hand to color. And another way they can do that is to use opposite ways of coloring, like opposite strokes or techniques. So like, oh, for this week, everything you do has to be like a dot art where you have to just make only dots. We have to color in circles or swirls or crosshatch and just make the coloring a challenge. And I think that trends it up a little bit for the preteens in your group.
So fun. Tip number 2 is if you plan far enough ahead, you can actually celebrate the real opposite day. So that is January 25th. Now, this is our recommended series for February. So if you are doing it according to our scope and sequence, what you can do is on January 25th, use that as a chance to like hype up this series. But you can also use it as a chance to like celebrate your volunteers a little bit. A few things you could do. I mean, you probably have a zillion ideas, but like you could maybe write them a card backwards so they have to like look at it in a mirror to read it. Or if you're feeling risky, you could send them a text and be like, "You're awful." But then you'd have to say, just kidding. It's opposite day. You're actually the best. So, do that if you're feeling wild. But yeah, all sorts of fun things you can do. But use that holiday to kick off this series and celebrate your volunteers if you plan far enough ahead.
I love that. I'm going to wait for a text from you on
Great.
January 25th telling me I'm awful.
I got it. Yep, done.
And I'm going to forget. I'm going to be like, Elle hates me. Our third tip for you is to, it's just a really silly one, but count the word opposite in our teaching videos. So if you take a look at Grow TV and Callie's World, which are our teaching videos inside Grow, you'll see that they had so much fun coming up with these opposite ideas, and they say the word opposite quite a few times. So just challenge your kids to be like, hey, how many times did Carl say the word opposite in this week's episode? Or how many times did Callie say the word opposite in this week's episode? And that'll just be a really interesting way to get kids to pay attention throughout the entire video.
I love that. And also, by the way, I'm drinking out of my Carl mug today. This is Carl busting a whole bunch of really terrible dance moves. I think I need a Callie mug to balance this out.
Right. We
We
need
got
a
to work on
Callie
that.
mug because she's an amazing dancer.
He is an amazing dancer. They should have a dance off, Carl
They
versus
should-
Callie.
You guys, we're going to make this happen one day.
Amazing. Okay. The last tip that we have for you, friends, is to tie this series into this quarter's spiritual habit. If you have been paying attention to like our discipleship strategy, then you know that this quarter we're focusing on spending time with God. And the cool thing is that this series ties into that really, really well, because all of these things that we're learning about the way that Jesus teaches us to treat others, the way that Jesus teaches us to follow God, are all ways that we can connect with God a little bit better. So try to tie that in as much as you can for your kids. And once you get to kind of a little bit closer to Easter, you can actually use our discipleship activity. And if you haven't looked ahead at that, we do have a deep dive that is specifically about that discipleship activity, which is called Crossway Station, as well as a really fun Easter-ish event that you can do as well. So if you haven't watched that yet, keep your eyes peeled for the deep dive on those two things as well. And friends, that is it. We covered all the things for this month in Grow Kids. Thank you so much for watching. We would love to see all of your ideas and all of the fun things that you do with this. So please share with us. You're amazing. We'll see you next time. Bye.